2 years ago, I finished building this hangar on my property from a metal building kit. Now, from breaking ground to the final screw, I learned a ton along the process, and not just what to do, but what not to do. That was close. Now in this video, I want to show you how it's held up, what regrets I have from the build, and the things I wish people would have told me before I even started this. If you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you some tips that could save you some time, money, and headaches when you build a metal building of your own. Now, to those of you that don't know me, my name's Trent Palmer. I fly a big tired bush plane in the backcountry here in Reno, Nevada, and I base it at my house. I built this hangar 2 years ago. And for the basic rundown for anyone that didn't follow along, and also if you are interested, I will put the whole playlist to the build series right up here. Basically, this building has an outside footprint of 74 feet by 50. Now, I moved the east side wall in 12 feet to give me some parking or shade area on that side of the building. So the interior portion is 62 by 50 feet. Now, the main opening on the front of the building is going to be a 45 foot by 14 foot bifold hangar door that I got from Diamond Doors. I've also got a 10 by 10 garage door that I can use for getting smaller things in and out from the front side of the building. I've also got 2 man doors, one on each sidewall of the building. And I also added 5 3 foot by 6 foot windows in the building itself, as well as 2 more of those in the hangar door just to add natural light to the building. So as far as height of the building, the low side of the end wall is at about 17.5 feet. A cathedral's up to about 20 feet over the hangar door. So that should give you an idea of the size I went with. Now, from experience, I can tell you, since I'm only parking one plane in here, I did give myself enough room for other growth or expansion and to do more than just park an airplane in here, because this isn't just a garage for the airplane, it's my shop. We're using some space for a little workout area, store all my film gear because I, still do from time to time work in the film industry. That is the purpose of this building. And I'll give you the quick tour. Like I said, we've got a 10 by 10 foot garage door, allows us to bring in something like a side-by-side, park that in here. And then this whole side of the building is kind of like my shop slash storage area. I've got a lever rack system with the sliding storage, which allows me to store all my different things, whether it's camping gear, fishing gear, camera gear. I've even got some of my merchandise that I, keep on hand over there. I've got an 8-foot workbench in the center that's built in, do all my 3D printing and working in here. Got a movable workbench, and that was the other thing that throughout the whole building, if it's not attached or set against the wall, I want it to move. So I've got a fabrication table over there for welding and cutting and building things. It's all built on wheels with leveling feet. All the toolboxes and workstations are also going to be movable. So I tried to make everything as modular and mobile as possible so that you can kind of change things up. I'll have times where buddies come into town with other airplanes, and I want to be able to have space to park multiple planes. And prior to all the junk in here, I had fit 4 or 5 Kit Fox or Highlander size planes. With a Super Cub, I can currently fit 3 as we sit. Coming along the back wall, got fridge, tools, the Boxo tools, which is all the best tools as far as I'm concerned, just because of the organization I've got literally every tool I could ever want. It's got a home. If a tool's missing because you got an open space. So that thing is awesome. Little lounge area with the old couch from our house, my old toolbox, like I mentioned, the fab table. And then we start getting into the back section, which is kind of just my storage junk area. I do have all the mechanical for the in-floor heat, which is something I should mention during the process of building this. I insulated under the concrete, or before we poured concrete, and I put 3,000 feet of PEX tubing so that I could heat this place with radiant heat. Now, when I built the place, I built it as an insulated but unheated building, and we'll get back to that in a minute, why I did that and why I think you should too. But continuing the tour, this is kind of going to be our little fitness area. As I'm getting older and I'm starting to feel older, I'm realizing I got to do something to get myself in check. So starting to get a little bit more into, trying to feel better. So sauna, exercise area, all that. And then the center is always just kind of kept clear for the airplane. Now, as a quick rundown of the process of how this whole process works of building a metal building, especially if you're someone like me that is going to build it yourself, basically the process starts with the ordering process, going through the building manufacturer, retailer, or whoever you're ordering from. The funny thing with that, I went back and forth with the company I went with for about 3 years. We were basically just chasing rising steel prices, and I kept expanding and growing on the building that I had originally designed, realizing I probably wanted more space than I originally thought, which in hindsight, I'm very glad I did, because very quickly you'll find you run out of space, or you grow into whatever space you have. But after ordering the building, I started the site work, did all that myself. I have a little skid steer. It's super handy if you have access to a tractor and you can do your own site work. Highly recommend it, but don't discount the importance of compaction. That's something I'll get back to later. After the site work, we started foundation, got all the concrete poured. At that point, the building showed up. Building came on one large trailer, which I was blown away that it fit on a single semi-trailer. Unloading that, you're gonna need some specialty equipment, at least like a telehandler or a forklift of some type. And then from that point, we went right into the erection phase, which is where you are erecting the steel frames that are the structure of the entire building. That part, super fun and super easy. You get to work with some pretty big equipment, working on scissor lifts and boom lifts. And, you know, for the most part, it's fun. It's like an erector set. You just got to line everything up, throw a bolt in. You do need to take a little bit of special precaution to make sure you plumb and square it before you go too out of hand, because if you erect that first frame and it's not perfectly plumb and square, your whole building's going to be twisted the whole way through. So then once you get the whole frame assembled, that's when you get into the sheeting, being siding and roofing. With mine, I have a sandwiched insulation system on the walls. I did the energy saver roof system, which fills the entire cavity of the purlins on the roof, and it also sandwiches another layer on the outside. And during that process is the same time that you do windows and doors. And then after that, just rolled right into electrical, and at that point, the building was pretty much done. Now, like I said, I did build this place. I'm not gonna pretend like I did it by myself with no help. I do have some good friends that came out and helped, as well as friends with, you know, equipment that were able to come out to help. As far as we brought out, I mean, a crane, telehandler, I had a scissor lift, another boom lift. We had all the right tools, which I highly recommend if you're gonna do this, that you just kind of plan ahead and budget in for renting the right equipment, because that is a huge thing. This is something that you're gonna need at least one extra set of hands, but on big days, you're probably gonna want more than that. So while I did build this, I'm not gonna pretend like it was just like I did it by myself alone. I did have some help. So after 2 years, there's a lot of things I'm happy with and a few things that I regret. Overall, super happy with this building. I'm very happy with the size I built. I am happy with the structure itself holding up. I'm glad I put such a ridiculous amount of outlets in. That was something that seemed overkill when I was building this place, but I'm glad I did it. Polished floors. We polished the concrete in here, which was a pain in the butt at the time, but it's been honestly zero maintenance, and I love how it looks. It's easy to clean. Very happy with that. Now, some things that were unexpected. This building gets very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. And even though I did insulate the whole building, it surprised me how much this building, you know, cools and heats with the seasons. And it's very hard to get it to maintain a temperature. I kind of was hoping that I would, just because the south-facing windows would get some passive solar nature, and then this thing would just stay comfortable in the winter on its own, and it definitely doesn't. Now, this last winter, I did actually finish out my heating system in here, which is all radiant, and I've wanted to heat it passively. So I put a whole bunch of solar hot water collectors on the back wall. The sun passively heats it. It heats the building, and it does take the edge off, although it's not quite warm enough. I do also have a tankless hot water heater that I can flip on and burn propane, which is awesome. That's probably what I'll be doing a lot this coming winter, at least to prime the system so that the sun can just kind of keep it at the temperature throughout the day. In the summer, at some point, I need to hook up some pipe I buried in the ground to see if I can keep the slab cool. I also have a ventilation fan that's programmed to turn on every evening, and it just blows all the hot air out. It's up high, mounted on the wall. So it's kind of how I've been trying to combat this lack of conditioned air in here. Now, one of the things I do regret, or I wish I would have had the means to do differently, is the insulation. Now, the insulation package in this, like I mentioned before, I have an R13 batting that we sandwich between the wall girts and the siding. The problem with that, sure that this is a 4-inch batting that should be an R13. However, where you squish it in between the girts and the actual siding, you're compressing the insulation so much that it loses all the R value. So when you look at this whole wall, I have insulation in sections, but anywhere that there's a framing member, it's cut down so much that there really isn't that thermal break that I would like. And the other thing, I just really don't love the look of the batting. We tried our best to get wrinkles out and failed. Also, it's super sensitive. So if you're like walking around with something like even remotely pokey, you can poke a hole in it. There was an option for doing those insulated panels, but the building company actually didn't even get me a quote on them because they knew how much I was pushed into a corner with my budget limitations. So unfortunately, I knew that this was the route I'd have to go. In hindsight, I guess, would I have saved up longer? Maybe, just to have paid for that better insulation. It would have given a better, tighter building with just a better R value all around, which would have been really nice. Two other things I wish I would have thought of ahead of time. This building, and I'm assuming all metal buildings, act like a Faraday cage. So cell signal does not work in here, and I'm too far from my house to really get internet down here. So I wish I would have planned in some conduit to run like a Cat 7 Ethernet cable so I could have expanded my internet out here. I did recently upgrade to some really expensive Wi-Fi mesh system that actually seems to be working okay, but it would have been really nice if I had just put conduit in the ground so I could have actually had a cable connecting the house to here. The last thing, and this is just me getting a little bit more ultimate wish list. I wish I would have planned in structure to put a gantry in. And now I'm talking to the people at R&M Steel, the company I bought through, to see if I could hang a hoist from this center beam, just because I would love to have the ability to lift things. Say I pull in a trailer, want to lift something off the trailer, even the camper shell on my truck or my fly fishing raft. It would be awesome to just lift it up and out of the way. And eventually I would like to get floats on my airplane, and it would make it easier to change onto floats if I could lift the whole airplane off the ground. Again, this is like total like pipe dream wish list, but in the big scheme of things, it wouldn't have added a lot to the building to just plan in that load to the engineering of it and not be trying to makeshift something later. Now for the list of things that I learned that can save you time and money if you go to build a metal building like this. The first one that I wish someone had told me earlier on is beware of dodgy resellers. Now the metal building market for some reason is just kind of a shady one. There's a lot of companies that pretend like they're manufacturers of the building kits and they aren't. A lot of them are resellers and a lot aren't even affiliated with them. So what'll happen is you might find a company that has prices listed online, you inquire, they'll send you an email saying, yeah, let us know what you're looking for. And then a few weeks later, or maybe even really quickly after that, you're gonna start getting emails about these like fire sales. Someone backed out on a kit and it happens to be a building that's very similar to what you wanted. Now the problem with these, a lot of times that building, if it even exists, isn't going to be built to your actual code and requirements that you have for your jurisdiction, county or town or city or whatever you're in. The other thing is a lot of times they won't come with engineered drawings or plans at all. A lot of them are missing the hardware. It can just turn into a bunch of nightmares. And I have heard of total nightmare stories where it was just a scam just to get people to put a deposit in and then the company's just like vaporized into thin air. So be aware of that. Make sure you vet out whatever company you're gonna go with. I actually went up and visited the facility, R&M Steel. I don't think that's a standard thing to do, but just do a bit of vetting to make sure that the company you're working with is reputable. Now the second thing is don't build the building too small. I know it's very easy to try to save money and start making it smaller and figure you can work in a smaller space, but there's a saying that I've heard a lot of people tell me, which is very true, that no one ever builds a building like this and says, man, I wish I would have built a smaller one. I guess short of building something gigantic that you can't afford to heat. But overall, most of the time, regardless how big a building you get, you're going to fill that space pretty quickly. And if you're building a shop or hangar or metal building, it's because you don't have enough space as is, and you will find a way to fill it regardless how big it is. Now, there is a caveat to that. Make sure you take a little time, look into your local codes, because where I live here, if the building is over 5,000 square feet, then I had to equip it with fire sprinklers. And where I live, I am on a well. To build out a system that has the appropriate water pressure and amount of water above ground, it would have been a significant increase in price if I had to put fire sprinklers in this. Also, there was a mandatory setback for this to be considered a detached structure from the house, that is. I think it had to be at least 30 feet away from the house to be considered a separate structure. So if I had put this another 10 feet closer to the house, I would have still had to fire sprinkler both this and the house because they would have been considered attached, which is strange. My third thing is gonna be, don't be afraid to take it on. Now, this can be a pretty intimidating project when you look at it, because especially when you don't have any of the parts in front of you and you're kind of just learning about the process, it seems like a lot. And whether you're working with a contractor or not, there are plenty of parts of building a metal building that you can take on yourself, regardless of your skill set. And one of the big ones that, even if you were gonna hire someone to help with erecting the building or putting siding on, which, you know, in hindsight, if there was anything I was going to sub out, or I wish I would have been the siding. That was just a pain, cutting all those window openings, getting everything aligned and sandwiching the insulation in there was one of the hardest parts of the process. And the people that do this on a daily can come through and put siding up in no time. It took us way longer than I expected to do siding and roofing. So that would probably be one thing I would say you could potentially hire out, but it really wasn't that bad. Just know it's probably the least pleasant of the whole process. The thing that I took on myself and did virtually all myself was the electrical. And at least in my county, if I'm an owner builder, I can do my own electric wiring. I used all MC, which is metal clad, the wire that comes with the covering over it. It's a little bit of a pain to straighten out, but if you take your time, run your runs, plan it all out first, it's fairly easy, it's pretty rewarding, and it's awesome knowing exactly how everything ran. And when it comes time to retrofit or add things, like I added a welding plug recently, added the sauna plug, you're learning a skill set that will help you later on when you want to add or tweak or change your wiring. So I would highly recommend doing your own electrical if you have the ability. Now the fourth one is, I recommend building your metal building insulated but unheated. Now again, this is just in my jurisdiction, in my county. Because I did an insulated but non-heated building, I didn't have to deal with any of the res check stuff where I would have had to do a whole bunch of calculations to show that I was putting the proper size heater in and that this building was eco-friendly enough and you know, airtight enough and all of that. I basically alleviated having any of those hoops to jump through, and my permit was slightly cheaper. So what I would recommend, if you're planning on heating the building, build it as an insulated, unheated building, and then add the heating later. Now, obviously you can plan for whatever, you know, you need, whether it's power or gas wise for your heater. When you permit, which I do recommend permitting, that's a separate thing here. I highly recommend that you just do it by the book and permit it, because you're adding value to your property by putting a metal building on it, a shop. This is square footage that is, you know, valuable. Now the fifth one, don't skimp on the dirt work. This one, like I mentioned, I did my own dirt work. I did most of the compaction with my tractor as well as my truck. Where we live here, I've got very good dirt or very good soil. It compacts really well. And when I did it was the perfect time of the year. It was right at the end of winter going into spring. There was plenty of moisture content and the compaction was very easy to do. That said, I've still got some cracks in my control joints. That might be standard for most buildings. Even when I took all the precautions I thought I needed, and I didn't build any of this really on fill dirt. Most of this entire thing was on cut, which helps because once you're into native soil, at least where I'm at, we didn't really have to worry about compaction as much. But just don't discount that. If you're going to be having to pile up a bunch of dirt, make sure you take compaction very seriously, because that is literally below the foundation of what the building's sitting on, and it's super important. And the last one is just don't skimp on things that are gonna pay off later. Efficient things like insulation, LED lighting, and planning for some sort of heating and cooling system that's going to pay itself over time by being more efficient than other ways. I would say don't skimp on those. Those are things that, while you might be able to cut corners in a bunch of other places on the build, I would definitely plan for efficiencies later, so you're not just bleeding into this building, you know, wishing you had just spent a little bit more money at the start. You know, bite the bullet, pay for the better stuff to hopefully live and work out of this building for a long time without having to constantly be yelling at yourself for not building it the way you should have. So that's my list on things I would recommend if you're gonna build this thing. Now, to answer the question that I'm sure some of you have is, how much does this cost? That is a good question. I actually made a whole video on the cost breakdown of this build. I'll put a link up there, and also just go watch the entire build series if you're interested. You can learn a little. It was a cool process. The entire thing took about 4 months. which was relatively fast, but at the time it felt like it was a lot of work and a lot of time. And I guess in hindsight, if I wanted to do something that was quick and easy, I would have just designed a website with Squarespace. And yes, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, so thank you Squarespace for sponsoring yet another one of my videos. And for those of you that don't know, Squarespace is the ultimate way to build a website and run your business. You start with one of their award-winning templates and craft it into your own beautiful professional looking website, or you can harness the power of AI using their design AI to generate a website from scratch with zero experience necessary. They'll even help you generate the content. Like, you don't even have to type everything out you want on your website, because will help you with that. And they have features for every industry. So whether you're trying to start an online store or have a personal blog, maybe you want to book and schedule your clients using your website, you can do that with Acuity Scheduling. They accept every major payment platform through Squarespace Payments. Honestly, there's nothing you can't do with a Squarespace website. And so if you haven't yet, head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to purchase, make sure you use code Trent Palmer at checkout. That'll get you 10% off. Thank you again, Squarespace, for sponsoring this one. Thank you guys for sticking around. And you know the drill. Like this video if you do. Subscribe if you haven't. Come be my wingman. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.